Hi, everyone. Professor Philip Travis here. Military History 360. Here at EOU, it's week 6. This week, we're going to start talking about the Second World War. And for anyone who has not begun the E.B. Sledge book, we really need to start reading With the Old Breed this week. Here in a few weeks, we will have our first paper, which will be due, and this paper, of course, is going to be connecting or drawing connections between E.B. Sledge with the Old Breed, which is about the island hopping campaigns in the Pacific, particularly at places like Pelew and Okinawa, which E.B. Sledge, of course, wrote about many years after from his letters and his diary, from his journal, if you will, from his service there. So that's about the Pacific theater of the Second World War. And then Philip Caputo, who, of course, served in the Vietnam War, both as a soldier and later as a war reporter. He wrote A Rumor of War. And so our first paper, which is due in a few weeks, so it's not due, I'm just kind of reminding you about this, is going to draw major themes, major connections between With the Old Breed and A Rumor of War. And we'll talk more about that as we get closer to it. Now, this week we're getting into World War II. We're not going to be looking as much at the Pacific Theater this week. Next week we'll be looking specifically at the Pacific Theater. This week we are going to particularly examine the American home front and the European war during the Second World War. So I have a weekly lecture as always, and this weekly lecture is on Blitzkrieg, which was the military strategic and tactical revolution that was implemented by the German military at the outset of the European conflict, particularly with its invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939, and of course later subsequent invasions, particularly of France in 1940, in May of 1940. So we're going to be looking at the military, strategic, and tactical revolution of Blitzkrieg. We're also going to be looking a little bit at the American home front this week. Our reading for this week is chapter 11 from Ways of War. And again, I've noticed that some of you have already read With the Old Breed in the class so far, which is fantastic. But if you haven't started With the Old Breed by E.B. Sledge, please start that reading this week. Now, the major item for us this week that we need to really be focusing on is our test. We have a midterm exam this week, and the midterm exam covers all the material up to this point in the class. There are some things that I can draw on from this week's material, but I will ensure that we primarily emphasize the stuff from week 1 through week 5. So there could be some items from this week, week 6. This is going to kind of be an overlap week where we could have some items from week 6 on this test and some items from week 6 on the final exam as well. But I'm going to really try to emphasize the first 5 weeks. For the exam is based on lectures, it's based on readings, it's based on things I've said in the weekly announcements. It can be based on some of the posts and replies that I've made in the discussion forum. When you prepare for this test, I definitely would encourage you to not only review your readings, and hopefully when you're reading the book, you're using a highlighter. And if you're not doing that, I would recommend start doing that now. As you read, use a highlighter to highlight key important information from the class. But I would also say, in addition to that, in addition to the lectures that we've been watching each week, and hopefully you've been taking notes on those lectures, in addition to those items, I would recommend going back and looking through the discussion forums, and I leave those open for you. And so go back and see some of the big posts and replies that I made, because some of those items could also be subjects for questions on the test. I will give everyone in the modules, I will give everyone a theme or potential themes for a major essay question on the test. The test will include multiple choice questions and true false questions. It will also have a major essay, and the essays should be thorough. I will have parameters. I don't want I don't want you to write 15 paragraphs necessarily. So there are parameters. I do want it to be concise, but uh, the major essay will need to demonstrate a substantial understanding of some major aspect of the class. And I'm going to want to see some analysis as well as some specific detail demonstrating that you have understood major conceptual themes discussed in the class so far. And so I will put up a couple of potential themes for the major essay. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what the essay will be. I'm not going to tell you the exact theme. I'll give you a few major themes to emphasize so that you can feel like you have some options to study, and you'll know the essay question will come from one of those themes. The test is timed, 85-minute time limit. It'll be about 20 to 25 multiple choice true false questions, and then the essay, there could be some shorter IDs as well. Make sure you prepare for the test during the week. Prepare thoroughly. I recommend taking the test Friday, Saturday, or Sunday after you have prepared thoroughly during the week, so that you don't miss anything when you get to taking the test. So major test this week, midterm exam this week, reading chapter 11, Ways of War, and of course, start reading E.B. Sledge with the old breed if you haven't already. So real quick, and this is not the factoid, I'll talk about the factoid in just a second, but real quick, what you see here is pretty interesting little narrative about World War II. This is a Liberty ship during World War II, and the Liberty ships were really the vessels that made World War II. I'm not going to say made it a success for the United States, but the Liberty ships really embodied one of the greatest contributions of the United States to the Allied war effort. The Liberty ships, when the United States began Lend-Lease, which was the program to aid and supply the Allied powers that were fighting the Axis powers, this began in 1941. This was when the United States began robustly building armaments, supplies, food supplies, and so forth for those countries fighting the Axis powers. Lend-Lease was extending open aid to anybody fighting those powers. It was the most massive aid program of the war, and probably the most significant contribution of the United States overall to the war. Much of that aid was transported on ships like the one you see here, which is, of course, a Liberty ship. And these were built by shipbuilders like Henry J. Kaiser. And these vessels were put together in very short periods of time. They probably wouldn't make code in most cases. They were like 4 big chunks that were sort of welded together on main seams. They often didn't last very long because they would be sunk, but they only had to make a few journeys to their location, whether across the Pacific or across the Atlantic, to meet their value, if you will, or to make their contribution. And so the reason I have a Liberty ship here is a little bit of Oregon history. The first Liberty ship, the Oregon Star, the first Liberty ship was built by Henry J. Kaiser, the famous shipbuilder, was built at the Portland Shipyard, which was built or developed by Kaiser in May of 1941. And the first Liberty ship was the Oregon Star. And it was, of course, commissioned from Portland, Oregon, for the Portland Shipyard, and was itself an embodiment of this huge effort to supply the Allies. The Oregon Star, this is not the Oregon Star. The Oregon Star was sunk in 1942 after nearly a year of service. I believe it was launched in May of 1941, not long after the founding of Henry J. Kaiser's Portland Shipyard. Now, I'm taking a lot of time here, so the factoid for this week is going to come from the video below. I know, I've taken so much time. So I'll give you 2 bonus points for this one. The video below is on D-Day. It's from my location on site. Tell me a little bit about that. Give me a little summary in the weekly bonus point discussion board. Give me a little summary. Demonstrate that you watched this little video below, and get your 2 bonus points added to a test score at the end of the term. And also, if anybody is interested in classes in the fall, I'm offering History 437, which is the history of modern Germany in the fall. I haven't offered that for a couple of years, so I'm pretty excited about that. I've got some new content for that course. So if anyone's looking for online history in the fall, upper division, history of modern Germany, History 437, I will be offering in the fall. I'd love to see some of you in that class. All right, let's have a great week. I'll see you in the discussion forum. Let me know if you have any questions.